obvious realities. One reality is there. Number two reality is that what the younger ones, young children, age 4, 5, 6, they don't understand. You get the elders, they know things more deeper, more sophisticated, right? Okay, the second category, which with your learning of the philosophy and so forth, then you can discover some realities. For example, how this computer is operating, is because on the basis of the codes, software, the codes, and what these codes are, we have no clue. And the computer scientists, they have this knowledge, how it works. This is not as evident reality as the flower, the house like this. It's something which you have to study deeper so that we discover these things. Number two. Number three, there's a third category. For example, say your birthday, and say, okay, let's say, Shah, when is your birthday? You don't disclose your year. Just disclose the month. It's fine. August. And which day? Which 29th of August. And I'm damn sure that Shahad could not remember that she was born on 29th of August. Do you remember that? You don't remember. And how do you know that it's your birthday? You believe. Right? There's third category of phenomena known as very hidden, which we cannot use logic, which we cannot physically see this with our eyes. There's a third category, right? Where the first one, for the first and the second, you have to use your direct senses. You have telescopes, microscopes, or whatever you have to use these things to know the first thing. And of course, what you see through a telescope, microscope, oftentimes they fall under the category of the second also, subtle one. And then the second category, you have to use your reasons. What the reality is out there, you can figure that out through reasons, through wisdom. So that falls under the second category. So what we're discussing here is about what the reality out there. What's the reality out there? The quantum physics is trying to explain what the reality is out there, independent of the observer, observed. Makes no sense. Then according to relativity theory, independent of the frame of reference, nothing makes sense as time, as space, right? Both time and space to be explained or to be explained on the basis of the frame of reference. Independent of the frame of reference, nothing really makes sense there. Okay, and so the point is that this reality, what they are trying to explain, and what the Buddha was trying to explain of the reality, that from the object side, nothing is there. It's all just what comes through your mind that things exist. This is where we see the parallels in these two traditions. But the question is, so how to get there? Of course, in modern science, one thing that I always, of course, my upbringing is also from science, and later into philosophy. My upbringing to the science there, I see still, I very strongly believe that the modern science, physics, particularly physics, and also the neuroscience, of course, chemistry is between the macro explanation and the macro, what the physicists are trying to explain in between these two. So what I believe is that science should maintain science is very, very rigorous system, no doubt. Extremely rigorous system. It's something very quantifiable. It's something which is measurable, which we can measure, quantifiable. And also there's something which can be replicated. So these are the unique strengths of modern science. Now the point is that, but the reality is much more. The reality is much more than what is quantifiable, what is replicable, and what is that's something that can be measured, is much more than that. Now, if science tries to, if modern science tries to expand the circle of the analysis, then it has to compromise the rigor of modern science. So therefore, what I very strongly believe is that physics cannot explain what the neuroscience is explaining. Neuroscientists cannot explain what the physics is explaining. It doesn't mean that physics is the weak science. It's a very rigorous science, but it is not comprehensive. It cannot explain the workings of the brain. Likewise, the neuroscientists, while it explains about the mechanism of the brain so beautifully, but it cannot explain how the workings of the elemental particles, how it behaves in the quantum fashion, quantum form, and in the relativity terms. So therefore, the point is that the science is so rigorous, and yet the scope of its analysis inquiry is also limited. So that I personally always say that science should maintain its rigor by not expanding the circle too much into the other domains of the reality. Right? If it expands, finally he's not the scientist, right? It is not even the scientist today, tomorrow, right? Or 100 years, or 1,000 years, what the scientists will do is in their hands, right? And of course, depends on the government rules, regulations, so forth. All these things are there. So with this in mind, the point is, okay, as I said earlier, both streams, they're trying to look for what the reality is. What the reality is. And the second part is that Buddhist philosophy and the modern science both, not only they're looking for the reality, the mode of inquiry into the reality is also the same. That is, through reasoning and through experimentation. That is very important. Okay, so it is for this reason that what the Buddha taught, the approach, this is the Buddha's approach, and this is something which is so precious, and this system existed since like 2,500 years ago. Okay, so the Buddha said, "O bhikshus and wise people, just as a goldsmith tests the purity of the gold through burning, cutting, and rubbing gold, you should also examine my words and put them into practice, not merely you respect me." Right? So he emphasizes so much for the need to know the reality through analysis, not through belief. This is a very strong point, and on this basis, you see that what we are trying to discover of the reality, which will have tremendous benefit for the humanity. Okay, now the reality that we're going to talk about, the reality, say the reality of the flower here, the reality of the flower here, say reality of the flower here. What is this? We say it's say the flower, and some people may say it's say nitrogen, carbon dioxide, the carbon molecules. Some may say it's electrons, protons, neutrons, and so forth. Right? Okay. So whatever is the explanation, how do you know that it's made of electrons, protons, neutrons? Who decides that? My mind decides. You're getting it? So therefore we have the two things, ontology and epistemology. Ontology is to know what the reality is out there, objective reality, what the reality is there, the object, and the epistemology is the mind which decides what the object is, the study of the mind which decides what the object is. That is the epistemology. So the study of the epistemology and study of the ontology, this is where we have to look for the study of the science and philosophy. Science and philosophy, they're trying to explore the reality, ontological reality, and the psychology and neuroscience, they're trying to explore the epistemology, what the mind is. Okay, here, so just the first one, picture is Niels Bohr, who is mainly credited for his contribution to quantum mechanics, and the second part, the third one, the first from the right, or the one sitting, first from the right, Albert Einstein, who is mainly credited for the relativity theory. Okay, so as we briefly touched earlier, ontology from the point of view of the quantum physics and Buddhist philosophy. The wave particle divided into photons. So, in fact, this was first introduced to me when I was in a class, I think class 12. That was like 30 years ago, 30 or 29 years ago, right? 29 years ago, this was first introduced, and I was so fascinated. And then later on, I think maybe about like 5 or 6 years later, then one of the world-renowned quantum physicist, Anton Zeilinger from Austria. Anton Zeilinger, he took part in one of the Model Life conferences with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and he was one of the world-renowned scientists. So I had the honor of meeting with him and having some discussions on quantum physics. So there I was casually talking about that, and I came to know from him and other scientists that this wave-particle duality of the photons, the experimental instrument. This instrument, I learned that in this world there are only 4 instruments. No, 7. In this world, there are only 7 instruments where these experiments were conducted. And then I had many questions about this double slit experiment. I had so many questions, and luckily I met him, and who was actually the director of one of the machines, one of the equipments, and I asked many questions to him. I said that I was very, very young, in the 20s, hot blood, and dared to ask any question, right? And I asked him questions, and he was already in his 70s. And still, he was so kindly responding to my questions. In fact, what happened was that during the dialogue in the presence of His Holiness the Dalai Lama about quantum physics, then after the dialogue, when His Holiness leaves, then we were having some internal dialogues with the scientists. And during that time, I asked some questions on quantum physics, and he must have been so happy to see a monk talking about quantum physics. Then after the discussion, he came directly to me, and it was a great honor for me. He came to me and he said that, seems like you have some interesting questions. If you have no questions, ask me directly. Ask me now. I said that no, this is bad as His Holiness the Dalai Lama now will go out for security reasons. We cannot stay here for too long. You can come to my room. I invited him to my room. And then I started to take, then I started asking questions on the quantum physics. I said, your experiment, I see that it's not to be bias-free. Your experiment, how you concluded the double slit experiment, how the particle, the one photon, is said to behave in the wave nature. So this I see is not too convincing, because still there is one area how you can look at the same experiment, you can do the same experiment very differently. And then he said, how do you do? And then I gave some idea. Then he said, this we did it. And I said, what is the conclusion? Again he said, then this is this conclusion. Then I asked, then you should have done it this other way. I gave the idea, and then he said, this also we did it. Then what is the conclusion? And he said that this is the conclusion. It was very, very interesting discussions. Now, after exposed to more philosophy, exploring the reality, I wish I could still meet him. But I have many more questions to ask him. Okay, whatever is the case, what I'm talking about is how the one photon behaves in 2 different ways. How it behaves as waves. Still, I'm not too convinced, because it's not that one particle itself, one photon itself behaves as a wave. No, it's only when it is seen behaving in the collective form. Thousands of photons shot, then they create the interference pattern. Not individually. So, if to say that this photon behaves as the wave, what I want to see that actually behave like a wave. But this is not what is seen. It is only seen to behave in a wave in a collective form. Only when there's thousands of photons are shot, one after the other, and then the patterns form, interference patterns form, which is only displayed by the wave, not by the particles. So this is fine, but still the questions are there. Whatever is the case, what the quantum physicists, what they're saying is that the same photon can behave like a particle and like a wave, which in the eyes of the Newtonian physics is not possible. Okay, then, and in the Buddhist philosophy, as Hansudra, form is empty, empty is form. The same physical form which is very gross, can be seen in a very different way, behave in a very different way, empty nature. And what is seen as empty nature can behave like a physical form from another perspective. So this is something which is not something alien. This is something very acceptable, and it's an incredibly great discovery. And what the quantum physicists, what they found was not an invention, it was a discovery, which means that they have found the reality. Likewise, the Buddhist philosophy, they have found the reality. It's not invented. Even before the Buddha came, this is the reality of the things, that the form is empty, and it's form. Empty here doesn't mean it's non-existent. It's a different connotation. Okay, so this reality, which the Buddha is explaining, which quantum physicists are explaining, this reality, both agree on one thing, that this reality what the Buddha discovered is something so profound. So the Buddha said, in fact this stanza was said by the Buddha after 49 days of his achieving Buddhahood. For 49 days, he did not interact with any other people. He was just in his meditation. And then the beings came to make a request to him. Then he said this stanza. He said that the path which I discovered is so profound that I don't find anybody around who can understand it. So it says, profound, peaceful, free of elaborations, clear-eyed, non-composite, such a nectar-like reality is what I found. Finding no one who can fathom this path. In silence, I'll retire. The words saying that this is a very profound, and it's not something which is beyond our apprehension. Meaning that what we see doesn't really reflect the reality. What we see is what actually do not exist. It doesn't mean that you are not existent, I'm not existent. This is not a connotation. How we see things. The flower exists, the flower does not exist the way it appears to you. Things do exist, but they don't exist the way they appear to you, like what quantum physics is saying. Okay, quantum physicists, what Niels Bohr said was that if you study quantum physics, and if you're not shocked by it, you have not understood quantum physics. Study quantum physics and you come out smiling, which means that you have not understood quantum physics. Right? So this, we see that there's a great parallel between these two, the realities found by quantum physicists and the Buddha. And now the question is, are these two realities identical? This could be your question. If this is your question, I wouldn't put the answer now. What I would suggest is that through the following, by the way, how much time I have? Till 8:30. Okay, which means like 8, I stop, and then we get some question answers. Okay. So the point is that so in what way these two are, one thing for sure that we are convinced about is that these two things, one, the concept of the reality found by the Buddha is very profound. One, the reality which found by quantum physics is also very profound. This we are sure, one. Number two, so profound to the extent that with the reality as presented by the Buddha, if you see this, goosebumps can come on your body. And you can have a sense of fear. This is what is presented in the text. And Niels Bohr, what he said is that if you see that reality as presented by the quantum physicists, you'll be shocked, which means that you wouldn't believe what you see. What you see and what you're discovering, there's a stark contradiction. There's a discrepancy there. So the fact is that what the Buddha is teaching, what the Buddha taught, and what the quantum physicists taught, you see that there's a discrepancy. Both of them are saying that there's a discrepancy between what you are seeing and what actually exists. There's a discrepancy there. So if this is how close they are, your question would be particularly those who are into this stream, in the quantum physics, and more and some of the philosophy, you may be keen to know to what extent they are going in exact parallel to each other. This could be a question. So for that matter, I'll give some presentations, and then later on, then you may inquire more. Say one thing is studying quantum physics. Study quantum physics, right? And not necessarily with all the complicated derivations, don't worry. Right? Study many aspects of quantum physics, and then study the Buddhist philosophy about this, what is to be discovered, not what is to be invented. Don't invent your own realities. I don't invent. You have to discover. That too, not through belief, through proper reasoning. Proper reasoning, and you can oftentimes, if you're exposed to both modern science and Buddhist philosophy, then you have, this is a great, great, great asset for you. You can use the modern science to understand Buddhist philosophy. You can use the Buddhist philosophy to understand modern science, right? This could be incredibly great, the compatibility, how the two things are going compatibly with each other, and how one can help understand the other side. So with this, what I'm saying is that then you can do the research yourself later on, to see whether these two are exactly identical, the truth, the reality, as found by the Buddha, and as found by the Niels Bohr, whether or not these two are identical. This is what, all the those at the back can hear me? The battery? Which battery? The battery. Okay. This is what kind of the Niels Bohr said. If quantum physics, if quantum mechanics hasn't profoundly shocked you, you have not understood it yet. Okay, now the Buddhist concept of what the reality is, ontological reality. What's the ontological reality? There's nothing really there from the object. From the object side, there's nothing really there. Meaning that everything is like what the quantum physicists present as observed, exists only by dependence on the observer. The observed exists only by dependence on the observer. Okay. Okay. Observed exists only by dependence on the observer. So observer, vocabulary, there's a difference in the vocabulary used by the quantum physicists and the Buddhist philosophers. Say, observer is the subject. as opposed to the object. And in Buddhist philosophy, we use the word the subjective mind as opposed to the object. So, observed, the object, as opposed to the observer or the subjective mind. So now, Buddhist philosophy doesn't mean that nothing exists. Things exist. Things don't exist from the object. Things don't exist independently. They all exist dependently, but dependence on the mind, the observer or the including mind. So to understand this concept is known as dependent origination. Things come into being by dependent on other factors. Nothing exists independently. So this dependent origination concept should be understood on three levels. One is dependent origination of causation, dependent origination of whole and parts, dependent origination of the mere mental designation. But the first one is that how the results they come into being only by dependence on the causes. Independent of causes, nothing really exists. If the human beings on this earth, if you know the first level, forget about number 2 and number 3. Number 3, if you understand number 3, it will give you goosebumps in your body. Right? Like what was said, it will shock you. Number 3. Number 1 will not shock you. But the number 1, if you understand this, no doubt the world is going to be a very harmonious world. No wars, no corruption, no terrorism, guaranteed. Right? This is so important. Only if you know that things exist only by dependence on the causes. Dependent origination. Nothing is independent in the air. East is dependent on the West, and the West is dependent on the East. Right? The West, they have a tremendous development in industries, factories, and so forth. Yet they want raw materials. Raw materials they have to get from the East. And the East also want to enjoy the luxury of the West. This you can get from the West. And the North and the South. So we're all dependent on each other. Right? Okay, this reminds me of one of my personal experience. Till that point, I don't really consider the first one as so important. When I experienced that myself, when I had that experience and seeing the reaction of the people who have no clue of these things, still they realize the first one, they become so compassionate towards each other, helpful to each other. This was what I've seen with my own eyes. Okay, how many of you been to India? Raise your hands. And how many of you been to the Manali? Raise hands. Okay, number of you. How many of you been to Rohtang Pass? 1, 2, 3. Okay, number of you. Wow. Okay, so when I say this, you will understand it. Those who do not have any clue of Rohtang Pass, don't worry. Just follow me. It was my first time in my life going to Manali. And for what? For my personal retreat. For my personal retreat, meditation. For that matter, I had to go to Manali first. From Manali, I had to go across the Rohtang Pass, and then get to my main retreat place. And I had no experience how to cross, so I relied on one of my friends. So my friend prepared a car, a small car. And as we drove, early morning we drove, and finally we got somewhere in the middle of the pass. And my taxi got stuck. And the road is so narrow, and you just turn to the right, direct. You die. Direct, right? Very narrow. My car was stuck. What to do? It's just steep mountain, and the other side, this side is mountain, this side is gone, right? And very narrow, my car was stuck. Then I asked the driver, do you need my help? The driver said, he's experienced driver, he said, don't worry. And then, how is he going to do it? No mechanics now, right? Already, so many hours gone up. But to my amazement, we did not ask for any help, but the people around, somewhere people, they were there,